The first is this inner self-talk critic that says, not thin enough, not pretty enough, not old enough, not young enough, or its twin sister, you are way the heck too much. You need to tone it down, right?
Be confident, be bold, be authentic, but don't forget to take action. This is Ordinary to Badass, where our stories empower women to step into the spotlight of their own lives and pursue what they're truly passionate about. It's time to step into the arena and become more than just extraordinary. It's time to become a badass with your host, Marie Sonneman.
Welcome to Ordinary to Badass, episode number 277. In this episode, you're going to hear from Allison. And let me tell you a little bit about Kay. Since going alcohol-free in 1999, Allison increased her income 6 times, helped Fortune 200 companies invent their next 100 million innovations, met and married a guy she's still crazy about 21 years later, traveled the world, adopted a child. She's written 2 books and moved to her dream home. So in this episode, we are going to talk about how to stop drinking. It can be permanent or it can be for like 21 days, a set amount of time that is doable. So we talk about that, and also how the thoughts in our heads and the stories that we run have so much to do with drinking. And you know what? This could even apply to other things like over consuming on food or drugs or whatever your thing is. We usually all have, or maybe it's spending, right? If you overspend when you're feeling a certain way, then you want to go buy some things on Amazon or wherever your place is, right? And we also talk about what you can say to other people, what you can do if you want to get out of drinking and people around you are kind of pressuring you to drink. So this episode is so good. I thought it was timely because we are in January. People have New Year's resolutions, things they're trying to change. And I think the stat is something like by 2 or 3 weeks into the new year, most people have already given up on their New Year's resolution. And so if your New Year's resolution was to drink less and you have kept up, but it's getting hard, now is the time for this episode. If you didn't even start, no worries, no shame. Again, it's the time for this episode. So I'm trying to bring you some episodes that are perfect timing for the new year and to help you navigate, because goals can be hard. So I know you're going to love this episode. Let's get to it. Welcome to Ordinary to Badass. Whether you're ordinary or badass, I am so glad you're here. Today's guest is Allison. Kay, thank you so much for being here. Excited to have you on the show.
This is such a cool podcast. I love what you're doing. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you. So before we go any further, I've got to ask you, do you consider yourself ordinary or badass?
A little bit of both, but I think more badass than ordinary.
So why do you say that?
Well, I've been sober since 1999. And early in my sobriety, I walked into a recovery meeting and there was this gorgeous woman sitting at the front, well-dressed, well-groomed, articulate, and she was telling her story. She said, I was in my living room. It was 3 a.m. I was there with my husband, my boyfriend, and the police. And I thought this was perfectly normal. And she threw back this glorious mane of curls and laughed. And at the time, I was buried under layers of shame and remorse and regret and embarrassment, all capped off with a dose of nothing to see here, ma'am, pass on by, And she just radiated hope and possibility and that sparkling aliveness. And I was physically shocked, like my whole body reverberated. And I thought, I have never seen anyone be able to be like that. And that's why I created Juicy AF, alcohol free, of course, is to be that beacon of hope and light and sparkling aliveness for other women. So I think that knowing that purpose and being so single minded about it is what's taken my life from being ordinary and kind of on the struggle bus to being extraordinary.
So I think sometimes people think that you feel badass overnight all the time, or that just something happens and no matter what, the next day, then you're just a badass, right? Was that your journey, or was it like a series of steps to get you there?
It was a series of steps to get me to where I am. And I mean, I was awake worrying last night at 2 a.m. So I am not there all the time. Um, what I've found in being alcohol free is I needed a roadmap for what this whole new territory looked like. And I needed a whole new network of relationships of other women that were navigating it in the same way at the same time, or who were a few little, steps ahead of me to show me how to avoid the pitfalls and how to move forward.
So I can't wait to dive in to hear more about your story and, dig into the details. But first, can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Sure. Have always felt like I was somehow not enough. I was born into a very happy family of four, and I was the fifth wheel. I was supposed to have been a boy. So existentially, I think I've just felt kind of wrong and like something was missing in me. And that was my kids' self-centered interpretation of the experience that I was having. And that sense of not being good enough gets exacerbated by growing up in a patriarchal society where all the women's magazines tell you and all the airbrush models tell you, somehow you'd be much better if you lost 10 pounds or whatever the deal is, right? The good news about that is that it really drove me first to be a good student, but it's also driven me to, in the beginning of my life, be kind of a success and achievement junkie. I was the youngest vice president of a global ad agency at age 28. Who makes a 28-year-old? I mean, um, and it really did drive me. Once I became alcohol free and got more comfortable in my skin, the irony is that my success increased. My income increased by a multiple of six, a multiple of six. I met and married a guy that I'm still nuts about today, 22 years later. We adopted a child. I traveled around the world. I wrote 2 books. Like, my life just became so much bigger and more comfortable. But the most important thing is that I have basically a sense of ease and comfort in my own skin. So I don't need that first sip of alcohol to take the edge off.
So can you expand on that having ease and comfort in your own skin and how it felt before and what led you to stop drinking?
What I've observed is there are 2 things that at least caused me to drink, and I find these to be resonant with the women that I work with. The first is this inner self-talk critic that says, not thin enough, not pretty enough, not old enough, not young enough, or its twin sister, you are way the heck too much. You need to tone it down, right? And taking the edge off of that voice or shutting her up for a little bit is super attractive. The other thing that I've found is that most people who are really attracted to getting numb are, I'm going to call them exquisitely sensitive human beings. where we tend to be live wires and pick up other people's energy and not know what's ours and not know what's theirs and not know exactly how to move their stuff out and how to turn it off and how to shield ourselves. And so I was absolutely like that. I knew what was happening without having any way to know what was happening. And getting numb from being overwhelmed with all of that was super attractive.
So when did you get to the point though where you're like, something's got to give, something's got to change?
Well, I had skipped over many a moral line and just moved them, just moved them as I was going. And then there was that one night, like things hadn't been good. I knew my drinking was draining me. And there was one night when I had set out specifically to not drink, and somebody offered me a glass of champagne one too many times. Wasn't my fault. And I told myself that little lie that, oh, one isn't going to hurt, or this time it'll be different, or it's here, so I'm going to drink it. And I think that happened at around 10 p.m. And by midnight, my kids were, for the first time ever, having to undress me and put me to bed. And I was done. The chasm between how I thought of myself and what I was actually doing was no longer deniable and was absolutely unacceptable. So I was done.
And then what led you to get into coaching?
Well, I've been an executive coach since the beginning of the 90s, even before I got sober. So I've been sober for 23 years. I've been an executive coach since 93 or 94, which, and, I've been a successful entrepreneur. At the beginning of the pandemic, I started an online 12-step meeting. And it was really for me and for my girlfriends. Last night, there were 80 people on that meeting, 80 people, 7 nights a week. And they're from all over the world. To have seen people walk in with their faces kind of ashen, their eyes dull, crying, their spouse has left them, they're living in a hotel room, whatever the deal is for them. And then 30 days later, you see them every day for 30 days. And all of a sudden you notice at day 30 that little pilot light behind their eyes has gone back on. Oh, it just gives me goosebumps. And I love that feeling. So being a great addict, I'm like, oh, I want more of that. Plus, this is an interweaving of everything I have spent decades learning. My executive coaching, my clairvoyant training, and being an alcohol-free woman for 23 years. This is kind of my magnum opus. This is the interweaving of everything I've learned about how to not pick up a drink and how to soothe myself without using alcohol. But more importantly, how to live my days without building up that edge that needs the ease and comfort that, just the corkscrew pulling out of the bottle of wine used to give me.
So can you expand on that? Like how to live your days without getting to the edge? How do you go about doing that?
Well, there are a couple of ways. The first one is getting really, really clear on my vision of my ideal self. And that's one thing that I help the women that I work with do, is to articulate that. Sometimes we can't access that just rationally. And so I'll have them pick an object. I teach them some visualization, intuitive skills so that they can start to see who that is in their mind's eye. And then I have them write very clearly when I wake up in the morning, this is how I feel in my body. This is what I see when I wake up. These are the conversations that I'm in during the day. These are the values that I operate from. And then we design their habits and their environment to set them up to actually be that woman now. Why wait? The second thing is we all have these old stories that run us. It's the things like I'm not good enough. They're all fear-based, and we all created them when we were little people making sense out of our experience in the world. What I show women how to do is, number one, identify what that is. It's always some form of fear. And secondly, we work together to identify 2 or 3 spiritual principles that are an antidote to that fear. So in my particular case, with this I'm not good enough nonsense, my spiritual antidote is to practice rigorous honesty, self-compassion, and service to other people.
And what does that provide you? Like, what do those 3 things provide you, or how do they give you the motivation for the next step?
Well, they are my intention and they are my next step. So instead of being very focused on this tip or this hack, I hold the intention of being rigorously honest at the forefront of my mind. And before every interaction or decision, I remind myself, right? Today is my day of being rigorously honest, and I'm going to go for it. And I'm going to deal with all the fear and all the resistance and all the stuff that comes up, because that's going to get me to the human being that I want to be.
And in turn, I would imagine that helps you to set boundaries easier or make decisions easier, because you already know what kind of your guiding principles are for the day. Is that true?
It's exactly true. The first time that this happened to me, I was a corporate employee. I was alcohol free for about a year, and I had created a methodology that I really wanted to go out and start a company doing this on my own. And so I was negotiating with the CEO of this global conglomerate ad agency. And I wrote down 3 words on my notebook. I wrote down honesty, courage, and sincerity. And I didn't have a script for how I was going to negotiate. And I thought, gosh, I'm probably going to walk out of here and they're going to own part of this company. And, those were my expectations. And I walked out of there with a $500,000 contract. It blew my mind. It was so much bigger and better than anything that I could have A, envisioned, or B, manipulated my way into. And it was this eureka moment for me. Oh my gosh, when I aligned spiritually by holding these principles first and foremost in my mind and pushing through my fear and being true to them, what unfolds is so much more magnificent than anything I could have created.
So earlier you mentioned this idea of having a network of relationships. Why is that important for sobriety?
We all operate inside a ring of fear. And it's a self-constructed ring of fear, but it feels very real. What I have found is essential to pushing through that ring of fear, or deconstructing it, or widening it the next rung out, are 2 things. One is a roadmap, and the other is somebody that you can hold hands with who's walking through their own ring of fear that's very similar to yours.
Yeah, I would assume too, if you have a different network of friends, they're probably going through some of the same stuff you are. But then also, drinking seems to be one of those things, like when you go out with friends or a group of people, that people tend to like try to peer pressure others on. So maybe if you have either friends you can go out with that won't do that, or like support people who are like, oh yeah, I'm going through the same thing. Is there anything you teach your clients about that, like what to do when they're out with other people and kind of getting pressured?
Oh my gosh. First of all, there's research that shows that we adapt to mirror our friends. So if your friends are obese, likelihood you are too. If your friends smoke, likely you are too. Same thing with drinking. I help my clients in the communities to figure out in advance their responses to those sticky situations. Like if somebody says, why aren't you drinking? Which, by the way, has happened to me 3 times in 23 years. Like, I haven't, this is like the biggest fear of everybody that stops drinking. And I just want to, number one, say it doesn't happen very often. But if somebody has the temerity and the rudeness to ask you why you aren't drinking alcohol, I always encourage my clients to have 2 or 3 scripted lines that they can use to respond. One might be, oh, not tonight. One might be, oh, no, thanks, I'm good. One might be, when I drink, my clothes fall off, and I don't want that to happen tonight.
Right, right. Or why aren't you eating dessert? No, I'm kidding.
I mean, it's like, why aren't you injecting heroin? Why do I have to defend this?
Yes, so true. So, how do people know if they have a drinking problem?
Well, I think that mommy wine culture today is the same as mommy's little helper in the 1950s. In the 1950s, housewives were numbing themselves out because they were bored to freaking tears. And today we numb ourselves out because we are so overwhelmed that we need that escape. And we're overwhelmed because, we're doing Zoom calls, overseeing. I mean, we all know the pandemic just made it glaringly obvious how little support there is for working moms. What I would say, though, is even drinking 7 drinks a week rewires your neural circuitry. So drinking as little as 7 drinks a week, which is like a bottle and a half of wine, baseline makes you more anxious. It makes the problem worse. It might numb that anxiety short term, but our bodies rewire and they anticipate that alcohol is coming online. And so baseline, we get more agitated, more irritable, and more anxious. So drinking actually causes and exacerbates anxiety. It doesn't relieve it. The second thing the neural circuits get rewired for is being more impulsive, and not just when you're drinking. So if you drink regularly, you're more likely to say that thing that later you're like, what was I thinking? And the anxiety and the remorse and the embarrassment are the edge that require the alcohol to take off. So very quickly, it becomes this insidious cycle. So I would ask your listeners to think about if the drinking you matches your ideal you. And if it's in line with that, knock yourself out. If it's taking you in a different direction, why not experiment with being alcohol free for a few weeks?
What is the first step for that, for being alcohol free?
There are 2. The first is to actually write down on a piece of paper what you get from drinking and what it costs you. And when you do that, I would ask you to pay attention to the time element. Typically, what I see is what it gives me is short term, and what it costs me is long term and more values oriented. And then to get clear about which of those things is more important to you. Giving up alcohol short term is going to be difficult, challenging. Would you rather have that? Would you rather rip the Band-Aid off fast, or would you rather suffer the long-term consequences? It's going to hurt either way. You got to pick which kind of hurt you want. The second thing is to make a 100% commitment to being completely alcohol free for a manageable amount of time. And here's why. It's actually easier than making a 99% decision, because with a 99% decision, your brain's always wondering, oh, is this the exception? Maybe this, maybe that. And our deciders get tired. We make worse decisions as we get tired. And a tired decider makes the decision for whatever feels good in the moment. So a 100% commitment means you've made one decision and you're done. You don't have to think about it anymore. Not for a lifetime. I'm not asking for a lifetime commitment. I'm inviting you to have a 21-day experiment to see if it feels better after 21 days or not. Because if it isn't better, AF, alcohol free, why bother?
So what do you say to your clients to do during that first, say, 21 days to get through that time?
Oh, I keep them so busy. So besides the cost benefit kind of analysis and articulating their ideal future self, making that 100% commitment, we start to work on setting up our environment and our social environment for success, and learn some new ways to take the edge off, because the edge is still going to be there, that don't involve drinking.
So earlier you'd mentioned you became more successful after you gave up alcohol. Can you talk about why you think that is?
I was so shocked to realize how much energy drinking was draining from me. It wasn't just feeling like crap when I woke up and all the energy that I expended to kind of feel physically okay. I'd work out really hard and I'd drink a bunch of water and like all the stuff you do. But it was also the energy that I expended spinning this hologram out in front of me, trying to convince people that I was actually okay. Everything was fine. I had it all together. Life was perfect. Pay no attention to what's going on behind the curtain, because it's not pretty. And I really feel like once that energy drain got cut, that anchor to alcohol, I cut that line and all this energy, and it just skyrocketed every single dimension of my life that I cared about.
So I know that you talk about the spiritual law of substitution. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, it's the spiritual equivalent of eat this, not that. And what I find is that nature abhors a vacuum. If I tell you, like Dostoevsky said, don't think about a polar bear, what do you see in your mind's eye, right? All you're going to do is think about a polar bear. Same thing's true for drinking, right? So on a very action-oriented basis, instead of drinking, go for a walk. Instead of drinking, call a friend. Instead of drinking, eat something, right? So there's a very tactical component of this. The spiritual substitution is about, instead, every time my brain goes to, okay, you're not good enough, instead I think about rigorous honesty, right? So I actually keep a jar of lovely things that people have said to me. So when I hear that, I go in and I actually read those little slips of paper that I have stuffed inside my KK Love jar. It's just a great counterbalance to where my brain can go sometimes.
Yeah, and I like that because that's like a tangible reminder. You know, anytime you walk past that jar, you're going to think of it and be like, oh, yeah, you know, I'm a badass.
I've got it right here. Look, I've got my jar.
Nice.
I'm not kidding you. I really do this.
Yeah, and previously we had Rebecca Kordecki on the podcast, and she had talked about like a wall of badassery and how she created like a poster with like all of the things that she had done that she thought were or felt were badass, so it could remind her. And I think sometimes we think we don't need to be our own cheerleader, but for me, that's the only way I've found to move past some of this stuff, is like rooting myself on or thinking the positive thoughts as opposed to focusing on all the crappy things that I've done.
Right. So I live in Boulder, Colorado, and I love to hike. The question is, do you always have your eye on the summit, or do you sometimes turn around and go, look how far I've come?
Right.
Because another spiritual law is that what you think about grows, right? What you pay attention to, your energy flows to. And I would much rather be focusing on what I've done really well and what I feel really good about. Oh, I was so honest yesterday. Good job. Then, oh my gosh, let's be punitive and let's beat ourselves up for some perceived inadequacy.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so interesting how our whole lives often we go without really reflecting just on the thoughts we had as a kid or the ideas we formulated as a kid and we thought they were true. Maybe they were true at that time, but it doesn't mean that they have to be true as an adult.
Well, the same magic that created that idea can create another idea. That is our creative, God given prowess in this life, that we are nonstop creating our experiences. And so we get to create what we want to believe about ourselves in the future. I'm not saying that your neural pathways aren't going to take you back to where you are or where you were as a little person, but it's more like a scar than it is a wound.
Right, right. And I would imagine that the more you build up that practice of like loving yourself or saying reaffirming things, the quicker you can bounce back from those negative thoughts.
That is really true. It's also not just for me, affirmations kind of bounce off my force field, but when I can point to specific instances. I love the idea of a poster of badassery, man. I think I'm going to take that. I love that. Specific proof, specific experiences or actions or accomplishments, because then it's not an opinion. It's really grounded in fact.
So, Kate, let's end with a tip to encourage women who are in the arena fighting for the life that they want.
Get really, really clear about your ideal future self. Pick an object that represents who that is. Cut a picture out of a magazine or print it off from the internet and walk through a day in the life of that ideal future self. The reason why this is so important is we've thought in our culture since the time of Freud that what happened to us in our past has determined who we are today. But the latest psychological research actually shows that the way we envision ourselves in the future has more power and determines more how we are today than anything that happened to us in our past. So being crystal clear about a juicy, compelling, joyful person and experience that you want to have in the future, that's what's motivating.
So good. And Kay, how can we connect with you?
So I am offering a 21-day Juicy AF experiment. And you can get there by going to juicyaf.life/ the numbers 21, juicyaf.life/21.
Okay, awesome. I will put that in our show notes. Thank you so much, Kay. You've been a total badass and I've enjoyed hearing your story.
I loved this conversation, Marie. Thank you so much.
And with that, we'll end our show. Tell the badass women out there staying in the arena, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, own it and get after it. Okay, let's do a quick recap. 5 takeaways from Kay Allison. 1. Get really clear on your vision and your ideal self. 2. Pay attention to the stories that run in your head. Identify them. Usually the stories are from some sort of fear. And then identify 2 or 3 spiritual antidotes that you can use to hold as an intention. For example, what you focus on grows. So if you're not focusing on something that grows you and helps you expand, then stop focusing on it. Maybe that was a bad example. Number 3, we all operate in a ring of fear. So you can create a roadmap to help you, or have other people who are walking through their own fears that are similar to yours. Surround yourself with those people. Number 4, have 2 or 3 scripted lines as a response for when people ask you why you're not drinking. Number 5, you get to create what you want to believe about yourself in the future. All right, on Thursday, 3 reasons why Kay Allison is so badass. Make sure that you tune in. And if you're loving this podcast, head on over to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and review. Every single review helps this podcast to grow and helps other badasses just like you to find it. Can't wait to talk to you on Thursday.
Now that you've listened to this episode of Ordinary to Badass, we want to hear from you. Go to our website, ordinarytobadass.com/podcast, and submit your own experience on how you took your life from ordinary to badass, and get the chance to be on a future spotlight episode of the show. That's ordinarytobadass.com/podcast. While you're waiting for the next episode of the show, wipe off the sweat, dust off the dirt, and get back in the arena.